I'd like to administer the oath. Would you raise your hand, please, and answer this question? Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you, and please be seated. Senator Sessions, it's our normal process, if you desire to introduce people that are with you, including your family, I'm sure you're very proud of. You're free to do that, and then go immediately to your opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe we've been joined by super grandchildren of mine. It's an honor for me to be here and to have my family with me. First, my wife, Mary, my best friend, without her love and support and sacrifice, none of this would be possible for me and our family. And we are so proud of our three children, each one of which are here today. Mary Abigail Reinhardt, our oldest, is married to Ray Washington, and they're now stationed in the Pacific. Thank you. They're now stationed in the Pacific Coast. They have two children, Jane Ritchie and Jimbo, and they wish me well this morning. My daughter, Ruth Walk, maybe Ruth, you would stand up, and her husband, John Walk. John is an attorney with the Department of Homeland Security, and they have four children, as you see before you today, Gracie, and Hannah, and Joanna, and Phoebe. Phoebe and Joanna are twins, and we're so proud of them. My son, Sam, is a graduate of Auburn and Alabama Law School. Sorry, Sam, about the game last night. Lindsay, congratulations, wherever he is. Sam is an attorney in Birmingham, and he's married to Angela Stratus. They have four children, Alexa, Sophia, Lewis, and Nicholas. 10 grandchildren. The oldest is 9, and you can imagine the week we had at the beach this summer in Alabama. Finally, I want to express how humbled I am to have received such overwhelming support and encouragement from our nation's law enforcement community. Many are here today. Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I would like to ask those present, please, to stand and be recognized, the law enforcement members that are here today. Would you please stand? Every major law enforcement organization in America has endorsed my candidacy. I feel the weight of the confidence they've placed in me. And gentlemen and ladies, I'll do my best to be worthy of that. And if I may, Mr. Chairman, yesterday was Law Enforcement Officer Appreciation Day. Sadly, on that day, we lost 2 of our brave officers. Orlando Police Department, Master Sergeant Deborah Clayton, one of the first officers to respond to the Orlando nightclub shooting in June, was shot and killed while confronting a subject wanted for murder. Sergeant Clayton, a 17-year veteran of the force, was married with 2 children. While assisting in the search for that assailant, Orange County Deputy First Class Sheriff Norman Lewis was killed in a traffic accident on his motorcycle. He was an 11-year veteran of the Sheriff's Office. These honorable and dedicated have dedicated their lives to keeping their community safe, and we should remember their service and keep them and our families and their families in our prayers. Chairman Grassley, Ranking Member Feinstein, distinguished members of the committee, I'm honored to appear before you today. I thank you for the opportunity to respond to your questions as you discharge your duty in the appointment process as prescribed by the Constitution. I also want to thank my dear friends. Stop the people. Mr. Chairman, if I might, dear friends, I want to thank Richard Shelby, my colleague, and Senator Susan Collins for the kind and generous introductions. It was very moving and touching for me. It's hard to believe, really, that the three of us have served together in this body for almost 20 years. When I arrived in the Senate in 1997, I probably wouldn't have anticipated becoming so close with a colleague from Maine, two people from the northernmost part of our country and the southernmost part of our country. It took us a while to perhaps understand our accents, but once we did, we became fast friends. Of course, Richard Shelby and I never had an accent problem. He was has been a steadfast friend, and I think we've been a pretty good team representing the interest of Alabama and the United States. I want to thank President-elect Donald Trump for the confidence and trust he has shown in me by nominating me to serve as the Attorney General of the United States. I feel the weight of an honor greater than I aspired to. If I'm confirmed, I will commit to you and to the American people to be worthy of the office and the special trust that comes with it. So I come before you today as a colleague who's worked with you for years, and some of you 20 years. You know who I am. You know what I believe in. You know that I'm a man of my word and can be trusted to do what I say I will do. You know that I revere the Constitution, that I'm committed to the rule of law, and you know that I believe in fairness, in impartiality, and equal justice under law. Over the years, you've heard me say many times that I love the Department of Justice. The office of Attorney General of the United States is not a normal political office, and anyone who holds it must have total fidelity to the laws and the Constitution of the United States. He or she must be committed to following the law. He or she must be willing to tell the President or other top officials if he or they overreach. He or she cannot be a mere rubber stamp. He or she must set the example for the employees of the department to do the right thing and ensure that when they do the right thing, they know the Attorney General will back them up, no matter what politician might call or what powerful special interest, influential contributor, or friend might try to intervene.
They make up one thing after another to create a caricature that bears no resemblance to the nominee, who is actually before us here today. Now, I've been on this committee for a long time, and I've seen these dirty tactics used before, and they're not going to work this time. Senator Sessions, it sounds a little strange to say this, but welcome to the Senate.
Thank you.
The Senate Judiciary Committee. I'm sure there will be some need to address false claims and fabricated charges during this hearing. Believe it or not, however, I actually have some questions about issues and policies that you will be addressing when you become Attorney General. The first is one I have raised with every incoming Attorney General nominee for nearly 25 years, and it concerns enforcement of federal laws prohibiting obscenity. In the 108th Congress, you introduced Senate Concurrent Resolution 77, expressing the sense of the Congress that federal obscenity laws should be vigorously enforced throughout the United States. It pleased the Senate, it passed the Senate unanimously, pleased it too. In fact, it is the only resolution on this subject ever passed by either the Senate or the House. Now, Senator Sessions, with your permission, I want to share with you that resolution adopted last year by the Utah legislature outlining why pornography should be viewed as a public health problem, as well as some of the latest research into the harms of obscenity. Is it still your view that federal laws prohibiting adult obscenity should be vigorously enhanced?
Mr. Chairman, those laws are clear and they are being prosecuted today and should be continued to be effectively and vigorously prosecuted in the cases that are appropriate.
In making this a priority for the Justice Department, would you consider reestablishing a specific unit dedicated to prosecuting this category of crime?
So that unit has been disbanded. I'm not sure I knew that, but it was a part of the Department of Justice for a long time, and I would consider that.
Okay. For several years now, Senator Chris Coons and Representative Tom Marino and Susan Dobin and I have raised the importance of safeguarding data privacy on an international scale from unauthorized government access. Now, that is why we continue to push forward the International Communications Privacy Act, which establishes a legal standard for accessing extraterritorial communications. The need for a legislative solution was reinforced in July when the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit held in Microsoft v. United States that current law does not authorize U.S. law enforcement officials to access electronic communications stored outside the United States. If confirmed, will you and your staff work with us to strike the needed balance to strengthen privacy and promote trust in the United States technologies worldwide while enabling law enforcement to fulfill its important public safety mission?
That'll be a high responsibility, Senator. I know you've worked hard on that for a number of years, as have others, members of this committee, Senator Coons and others. So working that out, understanding the new technology, but the great principles of the right to privacy, the ability of individuals to protect data that they believe is private and should be protected. All of those are great issues in this new technological world we're in, and I would be pleased to work with you on that. And I do not have firm and fast opinions on the subject.
Well, thank you so much. Now, I'd like to turn now to rapid DNA, technology that will allow law enforcement officials to speedily process DNA samples in 90 minutes or less. FBI Director Comey told this committee that rapid DNA would help law enforcement, quote, change the world in a very, very exciting way, unquote. Legislation authorizing law enforcement to use this technology, which you co-sponsored, passed the Senate last year. I was disappointed, however, that it got tied up with criminal justice reform efforts in the House. Now, I have two questions. First, do you agree with FBI Director Comey and with law enforcement leaders across the country that rapid DNA legislation is important and will help law enforcement to do their jobs better and faster? And secondly, do you agree with me that we should work to pass this legislation sooner rather than later and should avoid tying it to efforts on other legislative issues whose path forward is unclear?
Mr. Chairman, rapid DNA analysis is a hugely important issue for the whole American criminal justice system. It presents tremendous opportunities to solve crimes in an effective way and can produce justice because it is a kind of thing that you can't fake or mislead. So I am very strongly in favor of that. And my personal view, after many years in the law enforcement community, is that one of the biggest bottlenecks, colleagues, of all of our laws involving prosecutions of criminal activity is the bottleneck of the scientific analysis, the forensic sciences, where we fail sometimes to get DNA back, fail to get back fingerprint analysis, fail to get back drug analysis, chemical analysis, and all of this slows down and stops cases that should long since have been brought forward and disposed of.
Okay. I've read that some Democratic senators accuse you of opposing the Violence Against Women Act. That caught my attention because, like I did, you actually voted to reauthorize it. As I recall, in 2013, there were not one but two bills to reauthorize VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act. One had controversial provisions that had never been received in a hearing. The other did not. Am I right that you supported reauthorizing the Violence Against Women Act?
Absolutely. I supported it in 2000 when it passed. I supported it in 2005 when the bill, both of those bills I supported became law. And then in this cycle, Senator Grassley had a bill that I thought was preferable, and I supported his bill that actually had tougher penalties than the other bill. And it is kind of frustrating to be accused of opposing VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act, when I have voted for it in the past. There was some specific add-on provision in the bill that caused my concern, and I think other people's concern.
And, Mr. Chairman, I ask consent to place in the record an op-ed published in USA Today on this subject by Penny Nance, president of Concerned Women for America, the nation's largest public policy women's organization, if you can.
Without objection, it will be included.
Now, I have a question about the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division. The division enforces the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act, which protects the right of prison inmates to worship and protects churches and religious institutions from burdensome zoning and other restrictions. So I introduced this legislation in 2000. It passed without objection in both the Senate and the House. I would note for the record that next Monday, January 16th, is Religious Freedom Day. I hope that you will make the religious freedom of all Americans a priority under your leadership. The Civil Rights Division also has a unit dedicated to combating human trafficking. It was created in 2007, and one of my former Judiciary Committee counsels, Grace Chun Becker, was its first head. Perhaps you could comment on the significance of issues such as religious freedom and human trafficking and why it's important to include them within the civil rights agenda of the department.
Mr. Chairman, religious freedom is a great heritage of America. We respect people's religion. We encourage them to express themselves and to develop their relationships with the higher power as they choose. We respect that. It's mandated in the Constitution. But there are situations in which I believe we can reach accommodations that would allow the religious beliefs of persons to be honored in some fashion, as opposed to just dictating everything under a single provision or policy. So I believe you're correct. We should recognize religious freedom. It will be a very high priority of mine.
Well, that means a lot to me. Now, Mr. Chairman, let me close by asking consent to place in the record letters from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and the Boys and Girls Clubs of America. They attest to Senator Sessions' work on behalf of the vulnerable children and young people. And I also ask consent to place in the record a letter supporting this nomination from nearly 24 men and women who have served as Assistant Attorneys General in 10 different offices and divisions. They say that as both U.S. Senator and U.S. Attorney, quote, Senator Sessions has demonstrated a commitment to the rule of law and to the even-handed administration of justice. I could not agree more.
Without objection,
Thank you.
Those will be included.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome Senator Sessions and Mrs. Sessions. Let me just follow up. You were just asked about Violence Against Women Act and your support. Let's deal with the facts. Let's deal with what was actually voted on. Let's deal with the Violence Against Women Act that you voted against. You strongly oppose the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act of 2013. Spoke against it. You voted against it. That law expanded protections for some of the most vulnerable groups of domestic violence and sexual assault survivors, students, immigrants, LGBTQ victims, and those on tribal lands. Now, the Justice Department, by all accounts, has done an excellent job implementing and enforcing it over the last 3 years. I believe, and we were both prosecutors, I went to a lot of domestic violence scenes, crime scenes, as a young prosecutor. I believe that all victims of domestic and sexual violence deserve protection. Why did you vote against expanding protections for LGBT victims, students, immigrants, and tribal victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. Why did you vote no?
Mr. Chairman, I did indeed support the bill in 2000 and in
Now,
2000.
I'm talking about the bill that is the law today.
I understand
The law
what you're
today is
saying.
passed in 2013 by an overwhelming margin in the Senate and by an overwhelming margin in the Republican-controlled House, signed into law by President Obama. I'm asking about that. Why did you oppose it?
Mr. Chairman, a number of people opposed some of the provisions in that bill, not the entire bill.
I'm just asking about you.
I'm trying to answer.
Go ahead.
So when we voted in the committee, 8 of the 9 Republicans voted against the bill. One of the more concerning provisions was a provision that gave tribal courts jurisdiction to try persons who were not tribal members. That's contrary, I believe, the only time that's ever happened. That was the big concern that I raised, I believe, primarily on the legislation. So I voted with the chairman and the legislation he had that I thought did the job for protecting women, to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act, but at the same time did not have other things attached to it that I thought were concerning.
Well, on the tribal courts, those have now been prosecuted very carefully. Defendants receive due process rights. They have to. None of the non-Indian defendants who have been prosecuted have appealed to federal courts. Many feel it's made victims on tribal land safer. Do you agree with that? Do you agree with the way the Justice Department has handled such cases?